Everyone strives for peace and harmony because they lack this happiness in life today. There are times when they experience anxiety, irritability, and disagreement. And when they suffer, they do not just keep it for themselves, they also share it with others. This suffering penetrates the atmosphere around the sufferer, and everyone who comes in contact with this person will become hot and angry. This kind of lifestyle is really not right. Everyone must live in peace with themselves and with others. However, human beings are social beings, they have to live in society, they have to live and communicate with others. What can we do to live in peace? How can we live in harmony with ourselves and keep the peace and harmony around us so that others can live in peace and harmony? To be free from suffering, we must first know the root cause of suffering. If we observe this problem carefully, it will become clear that when we begin to create misfortune or evil in our hearts, we must become miserable. Evil or impurity in the heart cannot coexist with peace and harmony. How do they start to create misfortune? As a result of careful observation, it becomes clear that when we see someone behaving in a way that we do not like, when we see something that we do not like happens, we become unhappy. Unwanted things happen, we create stress in the body. Things do not want to happen or some obstacles come to block, we also create stress in the body. We bind in bonds. In the whole of life, unwanted things always happen, while desirable things sometimes happen, sometimes they do not happen. The reaction process forms a strong bond that constantly strains the mind and the whole body structure, full of misfortune, leading us to suffer. Now there is a solution to this problem. How to prevent unwanted things from happening in our lives and how to keep our desired goals from happening. We have to have this kind of influence, or we have to have someone with this kind of influence to help us keep things that we do not want happen and the things that we want happen. But this is something they cannot do. In this world, no one always gets what he wants. Nothing in this life just happens as desired, without what does not want to happen. On the contrary, things always happen differently from our desires. So the question is, how can we not react blindly to something we do not like? How can we avoid stress and live in peace and harmony? In India, as in many other countries, the ancients studied human suffering and found a solution. If something unwanted happens, they react angrily. Any fear or misfortune, they must quickly turn their attention to something else. Like they get up and drink a glass of water. So their anger does not increase in number, instead it decreases. Otherwise, they count 1, 2, 3, 4 to 1, 2, 3, 4. Or they memorize a word or a sentence or a mantra, or they memorize the name of a deity or any saint they worship. Their minds will be diverted, and they will be freed from the ravages of anger. This solution is effective and still effective. Because of this, the mind seems to be liberated from apathy. But in reality, this solution is only effective at the top level of the mind. Due to this divergence of mind, one has to push misfortune deep into the depths of the mind, and at that level one has to continue to create and increase the same amount of evil. On the surface there is a layer of peace and harmony, but in the depths of the heart there is a dormant volcano of misfortune, which, sooner or later, this dormant volcano will erupt violently. Other inner truth seekers went deeper and found that by experiencing the truth of the mind and body within themselves, they recognized that diversion was merely an escape from trouble. But avoidance is not the solution, they have to face the problem. Whenever a misfortune arises in the heart, just examine it, just face this misfortune. As soon as one begins to examine something, it will begin to diminish, and it will gradually fade away. One of the best solutions is to break your fears or problems into a series of smaller steps. Storing goodness in the depths of the heart cannot root it out. And allowing this misfortune to be manifested through physical or verbal actions will only create more problems. But if they just look at it, the evil will be destroyed and they have uprooted this evil, they will be free from this evil. This sounds great, but can it be implemented? They cannot face evil easily. When anger arises, it can quickly overwhelm us without even realizing it. Therefore, when anger overwhelms us, we will commit some act, whether physical or verbal, that is detrimental to ourselves and to others. Later, when the anger has passed, we begin to weep and mourn and regret, trying to apologize to others or to the gods. Oh, dear God, I was wrong and I beg your pardon. But later, in the same situation, we still react to the same message again. All these regrets are useless. The problem is that we do not know when evil will begin. Evil begins in the depths of the mind, and when it reaches the higher levels, it is so powerful that it overwhelms us and makes it impossible for us to examine it. Suppose I hired a personal secretary, and when I got angry, the secretary told me, "Anger has arisen." But since I do not know exactly when the anger will occur, so I have to have 3 personal secretaries to take turns 3 times in 24 hours. Suppose I have money to pay for such expenses, and anger begins to build. Suddenly the secretary told me, "Look, anger has arisen." The first thing I do is I will immediately blame this secretary. Are you crazy? Do you think that you can afford to pay for it? Anger overwhelmed me, and good words did not help me at all. Suppose wisdom is overwhelming and I do not blame the secretary. I said, "Thank you. Now I have to sit down and check my anger." Is that possible? I just blink my eyes and try to check the anger immediately. The cause of human anger or incident that leads to anger will come to mind immediately. As a result, I do not check my anger, I just check the external stimulants. This will only intensify the anger, so it is not the solution. It is very difficult to examine the unwholesome emotions of the external objects that lead to this unwholesome state. But for him who has reached the ultimate truth, the true oath, he has found a real solution. He found that when something happens in the mind, 2 things happen in the body. One thing is abnormal breathing. When there is any misfortune in our heart, we start to breathe harder. This is very easy to check. In more detail, some biochemicals begin to build up in the body, leading to various miseries. Each act will cause some kind of misery within the framework of the body. This is an easy to implement solution. Ordinary people cannot examine the passions of the mind that are immaterial, such as fear, anger, or lust. But with proper training and practice, one can easily check one's breath and suffering. Both breath and suffering are directly related to the evils of the mind. Breath and suffering will help us in two ways. Primarily, the two act as secretaries. As soon as an evil thing starts to rise in my mind, my breath will suddenly disappear. It will start shouting, "Look! Something is wrong." We cannot blame the breath. We must heed this warning. In the same way, misery will tell us something is wrong. Having received the warning, we begin to examine the breath, and we will quickly observe that evil is doomed. This phenomenon of mind and body is like a coin on both sides. One side is the thoughts or emotions that arise in the mind, and the other side is the breath and suffering in the body. Thoughts or emotions, the deeds that occur will be manifested in the breath and suffering in the meantime. Therefore, because we have examined the breath or suffering, we have examined the evil directly. Instead of escaping from problems, we face the truth as it really is. Then we will see that evil is weakening and can no longer overwhelm us like before. If we keep trying, evil will perish and we will begin to live in peace and happiness, a life free from evil. In this way, the technique of self-examination will show us the truth in two aspects, inside and outside. In the past, we often looked outside, forgetting the truth inside. We always look outside to find out why we are unhappy. We keep blaming and trying to change the reality on the outside. Without knowing the truth inside, we never understand that the cause of suffering inside is our dark reaction to suffering, happiness and sorrow. Now, thanks to training, we can see the other side of the coin. We can also be mindful of the breath and the things that happen inside. Whatever it is, whether it is a breath or a misery, we just learn to examine it without losing our balance. We stop reacting, stop increasing suffering. Instead, we let evil come out and perish. The more this technique is practiced, the faster the merits will disappear. Gradually the mind will be liberated from all evils and become pure. A pure heart is full of compassion for others, full of compassion for the shortcomings and sorrows of others, full of compassion, joy for the success and happiness of others, full of ambition, impartiality in the face of all circumstances. Once they reach this stage, the pattern of their whole life changes. They cannot do anything physically or verbally that could ruin the peace and happiness of others. On the contrary, a balanced mind not only brings peace, but also helps the surrounding environment to become more peaceful. This will start to affect others and can help others as well. By learning to stay in balance with everything they experience inside, they train non-adherence to everything they experience in the outside world. But this non-adherence is not an avoidance or indifference to the problems of this world. Regular vipassana practitioners quickly become interested in the sorrows of others and try their best to comfort others in any way they can, that is, not out of any selfishness but with a compassionate heart. Compassion and apathy. They learn how to be fully committed to helping others and at the same time keep their balance. In this way they are at peace and well-being when they work for the peace and happiness of others. This is the teaching of the Buddha, an art of living. He never created or taught any religion or denomination. He never trained the apostles to perform rituals, rites, or rituals in vain. Instead, he simply teaches us to examine nature as it really is by looking at the truth within. Because of science, we always react in a way that hurts ourselves as well as others. But when the intellect arises, the intellect that arises from examining the facts according to the real situation, this reaction habit will be completely destroyed. When we stop reacting blindly, we can actually do the deeds that are done with a balanced mind, the mind that sees and understands the truth. Such deeds are all meritorious deeds, deeds that bring benefits to oneself and to others. Every scholar advises that it is necessary to know yourself. We need to know ourselves, not just at the intellectual level, at the conceptual level, and at the theoretical level. This does not mean that one has to blindly accept the emotions or beliefs that one has just heard or read. Such recognition is not enough. We need to know the truth by experience. We have to experience the reality of this phenomenon of mind and body firsthand. Only this experiment will help us to be free from suffering. It is the experience of seeing our own inner truth, this self-examination technique called vipassana meditation. In the Buddhist language of India, the word vipassana means to see with the naked eye in a normal way, but the word vipassana means to examine things according to their reality, not just by analogy. Physical truth. The outside must penetrate until we have finally reached the ultimate truth of the structure of the whole mind and body. When we experience this truth, we will stop reacting blindly, we will no longer create evil. And by itself, the old evil will gradually be uprooted. We are free from suffering and experience true happiness. In Vipassana meditation, three-step mental training is taught. First, one avoids physical or verbal actions that disturb the peace and harmony of others. It is not possible to liberate oneself from evil if at the same time one continues to engage in bodily and verbal acts, which is only an act to increase the number of vices. Therefore, the law of morality is the first important step of this practice. They must be determined not to kill, not to steal, not to commit sexual immorality, not to lie and not to use alcohol, drugs of any kind. By refraining from these actions, one is left calm enough to continue the journey. The next step is to train the mind to master this unsteady mind by training the mind to stick to one emotion, the breath. They have to try to keep the memory on the breath as long as possible. This is not a breathing exercise, it is not a matter of breathing regularly. Instead, one has to look at natural breathing as it really is, inhaling as it exhales. In this way, they calm down more so that no evil deeds can overwhelm them. At the same time, they have to sharpen their minds to be able to do the work of the intellect. The first two steps are living a moral life and controlling the mind is necessary and very useful, but these two steps will lead to the elimination of impurities, unless they take the third step further. Purify the mind from evil by training the intellect into its own nature. This is vipassana, To experience one's own reality through impartial and unbounded examination of the ever-changing phenomena of the mind and body that manifest themselves into misery. This is the highest dharma of the Buddha's teachings, purification by self-examination. This teaching can be practiced by anyone. Everyone faces the problem of misery. Suffering is a universal disease that requires universal medicine, not sectarian medicine. When one suffers from anger, this anger is not the anger of a Buddhist, a Hindu or a Christian. Anger is anger. When one becomes anxious because of this anger, this zeal is neither the zeal of a Christian nor the zeal of a Jew or a Muslim. Disease is universal. Therapeutic drugs must be the same universal medicine. Vipassana is the cure. No one can oppose the law of living that respects the peace and harmony of others. No one can object to the training of mind control. No one can oppose the training of the intellect in their own nature, which is the reason for the mind to be free from all evils. Vipassana is a universal path. Examining reality by examining the truth inside. This is self-realization through real experience. When one practices this technique, one is constantly freed from the suffering of all kinds of evils. From the harsh truths of the outside to the ultimate truth of mind and body. Then they go beyond this and experience a truth that is beyond the mind and body, beyond time and vihas, beyond this realm of worldly change, the truth of complete liberation from evil. Out of filth and out of all kinds of misery. No matter what the name of this ultimate truth is, it does not matter what the ultimate goal is. May you all experience this ultimate truth. May all be free from suffering. May you all have true peace, true harmony, true happiness. May all beings be happy.